Chapter 7 Life with Little Rabbit. Yellow Cloud led the boy to his teepee. The woman who had called for his release trotted along behind. Thad was so weak that he could barely stumble along. The woman, he saw, was the wife of Yellow Cloud. Her name, he learned, was Little Rabbit. When they reached the lodge of the chief, he turned to Thad and said, "You obey this woman." To Little Rabbit, he said, "This boy, he is yours. You make him work." Though he did not understand all the words of the chief, Thad knew well enough what was meant. He had heard of the custom of giving a captive to a woman. Thad was Little Rabbit's slave. To a boy of the Comanches, it was the supreme insult to be ordered about by a woman. To Thad it meant nothing of the kind. He had carried out his mother's orders all of his life. She called him her right-hand man, and he had been proud of the title. Besides, he knew and he owed his life to Little Rabbit, and for that he would serve her gratefully. Another woman sat in front of the adjoining lodge, working at her embroidery on the buckskin pouch while her baby swung peacefully in a hand-embroidered cradle. The cradle was a bag into which the little fellow was laced in a standing position. It hung by two decorated buckskin straps from a nearby oak tree. Little Rabbit was dressed in a fringed and beaded garment of doeskin, but the other, whose name was Blue Flower, wore a white woman's dress of calico. Little Rabbit gave Blue Flower an order in a crisp, commanding tone, and she obeyed at once. "Is Blue Flower your daughter?" Thad asked Little Rabbit, who must have been near his mother's age. "Yellow Cloud's other woman," said was Little Rabbit's reply. So the chief had two wives. Thad had heard of that Indian custom before. When he entered Little Rabbit's lodge, Thad was amazed at the neatness of its arrangement and the beauty of its furnishings. He had always thought that an Indian lodge would be a mere dirty shelter, but here were neatness and order. The lodge had a buckskin lining upon which had been painted the stories of various battles and hunting experiences. The colors were bright. About the inside were brightly painted objects of daily use, such as war drums, saddlebags, carrying cases, willow backrests, and robes and pillows for a couch. A fire burned in the middle of the hard-packed floor. Little Rabbit gently washed the boy's wounds, and that night, on an old buffalo robe thrown on the floor, he slept the sleep of total exhaustion. The next morning, with no consideration for Thad's weakened condition, Little Rabbit put him to work. "Get wood," was her first command. Thad had begun his period of servitude in the camp of the Comanches. Thad made up his mind that Little Rabbit should have no reason to complain of his work, and after a few weeks, life became easier. At first, Little Rabbit seemed to be trying him out, keeping him at work all day, bringing water, fetching wood, and scraping hides. At least, after a few weeks, he was no longer kicked to his feet each morning by Yellow Cloud. Little Rabbit brought him a surprise gift one day. It was a suit of clothes. Besides the breechcloth, there was a pair of buckskin leggings and a tunic that came down over them almost to his knees. Now he would not only be warm, but his fair skin would be protected from the sun's burning rays. "These," said Little Rabbit, "are the garments of my son." "You have a son?" Thad asked, surprised. He had seen no one in the village who seemed to be a son of Little Rabbit and Yellow Cloud. "My son is dead," Little Rabbit said. "Long Knives killed him." "How did it happen?" he asked. "In a battle last year. Our men had gone to take horses, and white men found them. My son died." Thad remembered. It must have been at the Austin Ranch. The Indians had been raiding and burning, and a young buck was killed there. But he said nothing, for Little Rabbit believed that whatever the men of her tribe had done was the right thing. To her, the Long Knives were always in the wrong. As he worked, Thad looked around about him at the women and girls, hoping to find one with clear blue eyes and soft, dark cloud of curly hair. But the girls he saw wore their straight black hair cut short at the neck. This was the custom of the Comanche women. Every day when Thad went to find wood, Blue Flower accompanied him, while Little Rabbit watched the baby. He had hoped that while getting wood or water, he could circulate about a little and maybe find Melissa. After a few weeks, Blue Flower relaxed her watchfulness, and he was able to get away a little more each day. Yellow Cloud and Little Rabbit talked to him these days too, and he was becoming one of them. "You are no longer a boy of the Long Knives," Yellow Cloud said one day. "You will soon be a boy of the Comanches." Thad said nothing, for he was afraid to say what he was thinking. "You will see," said Yellow Cloud, "that the white man makes war against the Comanches. We must fight back, because this is our land. For many years we have hunted here." Thad knew the purpose behind such talk. Johnny Ainsworth had warned him that the Indians try to turn captives against their own people. Thad made up his mind that he would pretend to believe them, but he was determined that he would never be influenced by their words. He kept remembering little Celie and her mother and Johnny Ainsworth's face. He was still sure he hated the Comanches. There came a day when he thought he had found Melissa. He saw a little Comanche girl wearing a white girl's dress, which he recognized. It was blue and white striped, with little pink roses scattered over it. Either Melissa was somewhere in this camp, or she was no longer alive. He searched the face of every girl he saw, but no one looked like Melissa Branson. Coming home from gathering wood one day, he passed a crowd of boys playing a game. It consisted of trying to ring a pole stuck upright in the ground with a hoop made from a willow twig. He stopped to watch them. Scarponi saw and called out so that all could hear, Long Knife Boy is woman." Thad had an answer for that. "Scarponi is woman, ride woman horse." He knew that no grown Comanche man would ride a mare. Mares were for women. "I will never ride woman horse after I am a man," Scarponi argued. "Why do you steal her from me, then, whenever she runs away from you?" Thad demanded. "I do not steal what is already mine," Scarponi retorted. "I want her so I may have other ponies like her some day. Then I will ride only her sons." Thad asked why the Indian boy had shot her full of arrows, but Scarponi denied having done that. Scarponi changed the subject. "You white boy got spots on face." Thad ran his hand over his freckled, spattered cheeks and nose. "Freckles," he said. "Running Fox. And I call you Spotted Boy." Scarponi said, "We think that is a good name." Thad grinned good naturedly. As good as any, I reckon. He rather liked the name. Until now, Yellow Cloud and Little Rabbit had dubbed him Snow on Top because of his white hair. He liked Spotted Boy better. You steal my pony, Blackbird, Scarponi said after a little. I did not have to steal her, Thad said. She knows where she belongs, and she came home to me by herself. Maybe my father, Red Wolf, sold her to the Comancheros in New Mexico, Scarponi said next. Why hasn't he sold her before this? Thad asked. It was something he had wondered about, for he knew that many of the stolen horses were driven into Mexico or New Mexico. The animals were sold to the Mexicans along the Rio Grande, who were known as the Comancheros, because they traded with the Comanches. I did not want him to sell Blackbird, Scarponi said. My father will not sell her if I do not want him to. So that was it. Thad had to yield a sort of wry gratitude to the Indian boy. Had not Scarponi wanted a little bit for raising future ponies, she would have been sold long ago to the Comancheros, and Thad would never have seen her again. Several times after Scarponi came to Yellow Cloud's lodge and asked permission for Thad to come and take part in the boys' games. Sometimes Yellow Rabbit shook her head and set Thad at a new task, but other times she permitted him to go. All one afternoon they practiced shooting arrows at a mark on a cottonwood tree. At first Thad's arrows went so wide that others laughed. It was hard to get the hang of it, although with rifle or pistol he was as quick and accurate as any man at home. After a while he began to sense the direction and strength in the wind, and gradually he improved until he was almost as skilled as the Comanche boys. Someday, Scarponi confided, you will go with us on the hunt. Thad grasped at this promise with joy, for he had watched the Indian boys galloping over the hills and plains on their ponies, or returning from the hunt with their older brothers. He had envied their freedom and wondered if Little Rabbit would ever let him go with them. Now that Running Fox, Scarponi, and some of the other boys were friendly to him, Thad's life was not so hard. Almost daily, Little Rabbit gave him time to play for an hour or two. The boys got into discussions of all sorts, and Thad took the opportunity one day to ask about something he'd been wondering about. Why, he asked, do you Comanches raid and steal and kill the white people when the government has given you a place in Indian Territory north of the Red River? Don't they feed you and give you land to work? Scarponi's older brother, Whirlwind, spat on the ground and replied with a sneer. Do the Long Knives own this world? The Comanches for many generations have called this land their own. We have hunted where we would. Now the Long Knives would keep us on small lands far from our hunting grounds. We do not like that. We go where we want to. We like to hunt where we have always hunted. Thad had to admit to himself, much as he hated to, that he would not like such an arrangement either. Some time later, a band of Indians approached. They were greeted with a clamor of welcome, so Thad judged them to belong to Yellow Cloud's village. They were leading ponies loaded with buffalo meat and hides. Thad recognized them then. They were young men just returning from the hunt. Now he was made to do more squaw's work, scraping hides and preparing them for the curing. The fresh hides were stretched on the ground or standing frame and peg taut, with stout wooden pegs. With Blue Flower, he spent days on his hands and knees, scraping the hides with a hoe-shaped implement of horn or buffalo shoulder bone. All the bits of flesh and fat that clung to the hides were removed. It was a job that Thad detested, and it left him sore and exhausted by nightfall. He also spent many hours cutting the meat into strips for drying. Although Thad had already accumulated a large heap of wood for the winter, he was still sent out for more. The need would be great when the weather grew colder. Little Rabbit had stacked the wood neatly just inside the door of the lodge. Hunting for more wood one evening, he had to go some distance from camp. There was little timber in the country, and the Comanches burned most of the low-growing mesquite and buffalo chips. Thad was stooping to pick up a piece of dead wood. A voice spoke to him from the brush nearby. "Thad Conway," the voice said, "don't let them see us talking." He looked about as a girl stepped from the bushes. At first glance, the girl looked like all the others: straight, short black hair and dark skin, though not quite as dark as that of the others. She was dressed only in an uneven tunic of buckskin. An old a pair of old moccasins were tied to her feet. He had seen this sorry-looking figure about the camp, but had thought nothing of it. He had taken her for a Comanche child. He should have recognized that she was not dressed as warmly or as neatly as the other children. Looking again, he noted that her eyes were deep blue in color. These were no Indian eyes. It had to be Melissa Branson. His heart skipped several beats, and his voice sounded strange as he managed to say, "Lissy, I didn't know you. What happened to your hair?" "They cut it and rubbed bear grease in it to make it straight so I'd look like all the others." She seemed to be groping for words, as though speaking in a language new to her. Thad hardly knew what to say. The meeting was so sudden. "Don't let them see us talking together," she repeated. "They'll kill us. Buffalo Horn has warned me never to speak to you." Thad turned to break the stick he was about to add to his load. His thoughts were not working, but somewhere inside, he felt a lightness, as if the ground would not stay under his feet. He had found Melissa. "How did they get you?" she asked, stooping to pick up some buffalo chips to put it into her basket. Did they burn your house and kill your folks?" "No, I was on the creek with Travis after cattle. I was picking up pecans and we got separated. I think Trav got away." Then it occurred to Thad, did Melissa know Celie was dead? "How did they happen to keep you alive?" he asked her. "I reckon because my hair is dark," she answered, "and I didn't cry. I was too scared to cry." They worked at their wood gathering for a few moments without speaking. Thad believed that both of them had Celie in mind. Suddenly, Melissa burst out crying. Thad tried to comfort her in his awkward way, putting his arm around her while she cried on his shoulder. He felt a love for little Lissy Branson, such as he had never known before. He had longed to help her, but they were a forlorn pair of children, with no help in sight. After a while he said what had been on his mind ever since he had been taken by Two Lances and his friend on the creek. "Melissa, we've got to run away." Thad said finally. But how? She asked. I don't know for sure, Thad replied. But now that I've found you, I'll think of a way. The sound of the bushes told them Blue Flower and the other women and girls were coming. Melissa turned and hurried toward them. We won't ever speak to each other in camp, Thad whispered as she was leaving. She made no answer except to shake her head. Thad had hastily got his load of wood on his back and hurried in the opposite direction. After that, whenever he saw the forlorn little figure about the village, he gave no sign that he knew her, but he watched morning and evening to see which way she went for wood or water. When she seemed alone, he tried to get close to her without attracting attention. He found only a few opportunities to speak to her in safety. All he could say then were the whispered words, I'm still trying to figure out a way for us to get home again. At night, Thad would try to think up plans for their escape. Generally, he was too tired and would fall into a deep sleep as soon as he had rolled himself in his buffalo robe. But during the day, he was constantly thinking of escape. He realized that the first thing they must have was a horse apiece. A little bit he must have. He was almost as anxious to free the horses he was to save Melissa. No doubt Little Bit, smooth customer that she was, would have escaped long ago if Thad had not been close by, thought the boy. One day he was on his way back to camp, stooping under a heavy load of wood. He was grumbling to himself about the way he was being treated. And this despite the fact Yellow Cloud and Little Rabbit were treating him better every day. Hauling wood like a mule, he thought. Suddenly he had an inspiration. Throwing the wood down beside the lodge, he said to Little Rabbit, I go far for this wood, farther each day. It is growing scarce near camp. Comanche women have horse to bring wood. I need horse. Bring more wood with horse. Little Rabbit's eyes crinkled maliciously. No horse, she said. Then striking Thad across the shoulders with a piece of stiff hide, she added, Spotted Boy, good horse. Thad tried to grin at her joke, but it didn't sound even slightly funny. His request paid off, however, for the next day when he started out for wood. Little Rabbit said, Spotted Boy, get horse. He grabbed a rawhide hackamore and hurried to where the horse herd grazed some distance from camp. Most of the horses were hobbled and could not stray far, but they were also under a guard of half-grown boys and one or two men. Little Bit came jumping toward him as fast as she could travel. She was impeded by her hobbles, but when she saw him coming, she gave him a loving nicker and rubbed her head against his shoulder. He petted her, smoothing her silken nose and rubbing her neck. She was a link with home. He loved her almost as much as he did the members of his family. He ran his hands he ran his hand under his muzzle and touched her sore jaw tenderly. You'll help me haul wood, won't you, Little Bit? Thad was slipping the hackamore on her when Scarponi came running toward him. Blackbird, my horse, he shouted. You will not take my horse. Never had Thad wanted so much to clout anyone over the head, and he swung the braided hackamore in his hand. He knew he must go along in a good humor with anything the Comanches required of him, but he could not resist starting an argument with the Indian. This horse is not Blackbird. Her name is Little Bit. In Comanche, that means small thing. You steal her from me. Always she is my pony, Scarponi said in a quarrelsome tone. My people lose her when she was too tired. You long knives find her. She is not yours. She is mine. She would have died. I kept her alive. Now you steal her from me. Scarponi laughed. Many times I steal, he boasted. Now I keep. Thad realized that this talk might defeat his purpose, so he changed his tact. No good, this horse, he said. You keep. He looked about at the other horses, thinking this would be a good opportunity to select one that would later help him escape. He had decided that Lissy should ride Little Bit, for she was gentle and easy to gait. An easy gait. More important, she would head straight for home, so that if they should become separated, Melissa would not get lost. Now Thad selected a dark brown horse with a sturdy body and legs long enough to outdistance any of the others. As he rode him, Thad talked gently, stroked his mane, and patted his neck. Loading the wood on the animal's back, Thad was careful to fasten it so that it would not chafe the hide. Thad called the horse Bullet and tried to make him feel that he belonged to him. He had inquired of the boys of the horse guard if this one belonged to any warrior in particular. It would only make Indians' pursuit of Melissa and him more determined if he were riding anyone's favorite horse. When it came to Little Bit, he would simply have to take the chance. Perhaps it was because Little Rabbit had began to think of that as a son, or maybe it was because Bullet helped get the wood faster. Whatever the reason, she began to lighten up on his other tasks, and he had more time to play. On an afternoon, as Thad was busy scraping a hide, Little Rabbit sat with some of the other women sewing the seams on a buffalo hide lodge cover. One of the women said to Little Rabbit, "Your new son has hair like the snow." The other women laughed and joked her about the spots on her boy's face, as well as his cotton-like hair. When they had gone to their lodges, Little Rabbit set about changing things. She dyed Thad's hair with some sort of walnut juice extract and rubbed enough of it on his face to hide his freckles. Then she braided his hair into two braids, extending them with weavings of cloth and adorning them with red and green feathers. When he looked into the pool that evening, he saw the strange reflection of an Indian boy with light blue eyes. Who would recognize him as Thad Conway now? He was not sure whether he was pleased or displeased. Now Scarponi and Running Fox began treating him more as one of them. He came to be as skillful as any with bow and arrow, and often brought home a rabbit or a few quail for Little Rabbit's pot. She seemed proud of his accomplishments. Even Yellow Cloud commended him on his marksmanship. Although Scarponi was more friendly toward the white boy, it made Thad boil inside to see Little Bit under the Indian boy's reign. He did manage to show the Indian lad that it was cruel to use the jaw rein on her. When Thad first talked to him about it, he replied with a contemptuous twist of his mouth, "Pony him no hurts. It does to hurt a pony the same as it would hurt you," Thad argued. But Scarponi jumped on her back and rode away as though unimpressed. However, from that time on, Thad noticed that she wore a bit and bridle. Scarponi was something of a dandy in a Comanche sort of way. He kept his hair neatly braided, with bright feathers stuck in it. When he rode Little Bit, he stuck dyed hawk or eagle's feathers in her mane. Thad had to admit that the two presented a jaunty appearance. The Comanche boys had many games, and Thad now found time to take part in them. One of the games with a willow hoop. In another, they used corn cobs with three turkey feathers stuck in the small ends. These they attempted to cast through the loop at some distance or used a dart to aim at targets. Pine cones were used for toss and catch. Certain games were designed to develop warrior skills. One of these featured a shield and rawhide covered ball. One player held an old shield on his arm as he stood in the center of a large circle marked on the ground. With his shield, he tried to avoid being hit by the balls being thrown at him from outside the circle. The player who first struck his body with the ball took his place. The Comanche boys' heroes were the men most skillful in hunt or raid, who brought home the most buffalo or antelope. The boys worked hard at games that increased these skills. Thad was happily surprised one day when Scarponi came running to greet him. "We go on a hunt for antelope tomorrow," Scarponi told him. "Little Rabbit says you go with us." Thad had not built his hopes on Scarponi's promise made him some time ago to take him along on the hunt. Now he was full of excitement. Yellow Cloud took down from its loop on the wall a bow encased in a finely worked hide case. From behind his backrest he brought a quiver full of arrows. "You take these, my son," he said. "These were used by our other son." Before dark settled down, Thad practiced firing at a target with his new bow and arrows. He hoped to be as successful as the other boys on the hunt. Perhaps then they would consider taking him on a buffalo hunt some day. To hunt buffalo was something he had always wanted to do.